Welcome to episode 411 of the Thunder Underground podcast, episode 411. And if you're interested in knowing what the 411 is, it is that there is a brand new documentary out called Becoming Led Zeppelin. And if you can't tell what the documentary is about by the title, well, I don't know what you're doing listening to music. Becoming Led Zeppelin, of course, is a documentary about the beginnings of the one and only Led Zeppelin. It is exclusively in theaters. I'm not for sure how long. Documentaries or special screenings like this usually don't last longer than a couple weeks, and this is, I believe, its second week in the theaters now. So if you're one of those people that really like to see something like this on a huge screen, you better do it this week, would be my guess. I didn't look into what the trajectory of this film is, if they're going to immediately put it on a streaming platform or if it's going to be available for sale or what, but it's definitely one that any music fan should check out. Not just a fan of Led Zeppelin, but most people that are a fan of rock music at least have a respect for Led Zeppelin. So I would assume that, this is something you would want to check out because you click play on this episode. And the real 411 here is that Jason Wood has returned to the podcast. If you've listened in any length of time, you know that Jason was my former co-host here, and of course, from the very beginning, the originator. Me and him started Thunder Underground a long-ass time ago, and he left in 2021, and he's come back several times since, but it's been a little bit since the last time, so I'm glad that we're able to get Jason back on here to talk about something that I know that he is very knowledgeable about because he's a massive fan of Led Zeppelin, as I am myself, and so Jason and I took the opportunity to hang out and go see this film in the theaters. So we have a lot to talk about. That will be coming up very shortly. But before I get to that, I need to let you know who sponsors this podcast. And that would be Sunset Tattoo, a tattoo shop located in Midtown Tulsa. Their tattoos are done good and proper. They're state licensed. They're Native American owned. And they have a female artist on staff full time. You can check out pictures of all their work throughout the years on their socials. Sunset Tattoo on both Facebook and Instagram. I've had work done by Jake at Sunset Tattoo more than once that I'm very happy with. I know several other people that have as well. There's probably someone in one of your favorite bands that has as well. Jake has tattooed a lot of rock musicians throughout the years. So what you need to do is give Sunset Tattoo a call or shoot them a message to set up a time that you can go in to talk about what work you're looking to have done. Like I said, they specialize in all different styles. They can help you bring your ideas together. Get over there, talk to him, and tell him you heard about him right here on Thunder Underground. We've also got DEB Concerts, a concert promoter based right here in the Tulsa area, going on, I believe, 8 or 9 years in existence now. They brought so much great music to the downtown Tulsa area at the club level, at the arena level, and they booked the Roadhouse DEB concert stage at Rocklahoma the last several years as well. And speaking of that, if you're listening to this podcast the day it's released, which is Tuesday, February 25th, the Rocklahoma lineup was announced. The DB concert stage always houses the pre-party. Thursday night pre-party, if you hold a 3-day ticket you can go to, that day will feature the mighty Dee Snider headlining. Dee Snider, if you're not familiar with his solo music, especially, the past 6-8 years, it's phenomenal. It's extremely heavy. It's extremely good. This guy is one of the all-time great frontmen in the live capacity. You got to check him out. Trickster will also be there. I am unabashedly a huge fan of this band. I know that they fall into the lighter side of hard rock that a lot of people, like to talk some smack about, but I'm not one of those people. I unabashedly love it and do not give a shit. We've also got another major act on that day that has not been announced yet, but should be announced soon. We've got Orianthi on another one of the nights. On Friday, she's playing the DB concert stage the same day that Alice Cooper is playing the main stage. Does that mean she's performing with Alice Cooper at that time? It's hard to say because she has stepped in to help Alice Cooper a few times over the past year or so when Nita Strauss had other things going on. And of course, Orianthi was Alice Cooper's guitarist previous to Nita Strauss. Regardless, very cool, rare chance to see her perform solo. We've also got Van Halen, a great Van Halen tribute We've got Mike Tramp's White Lion. He was just on this podcast a few months ago. Mike Tramp, excellent in the live world as well. We've also got Dime Store Riot, great friends of this podcast that have been on multiple times. Fist of Rage, same thing. Great band out of the Tulsa area. One Night Stand. So many great acts on this DEB concert stage. Hit up rocklahoma.com to see the full lineup. Hit up debconcerts.com. Hit up their socials. Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter are all DEB Concerts. And of course, let them know you heard about them right here. All right, let's jump into this. Well, before we jump into this, let me give you a couple of announcements on some recent episodes that I recorded. First up, we've got Brian Quinn. He was the guitarist in Candlebox of the past decade. It was recently announced that Peter Klett, the original guitarist of Candlebox, has returned. Brian Quinn, of course, filled into that spot perfectly. He was an amazing guitarist. He had a band called Foster Child previous to Candlebox. He also had a band called, a hard rock band called Octane. You should check out both of those. We're going to talk about all of that stuff coming up here very shortly. And also recorded a great episode with the one and only, the mighty Ginger Wildheart of the Wildhearts. This guy has been involved in so much great music throughout the years, whether it be the Wildhearts, whether it be Ginger Wildheart and the Sinners, whether it be Ginger 5. You've got all this stuff that this guy has done. Plus, he was a part of Michael Monroe's band for a while, wrote some excellent music with him. He's written excellent music for other people. This guy is a prolific songwriter. 35 years in the game, basically. We're going to talk about all that coming up. Great interview. Super excited to get that one out to you as well. I've also got a couple other great ones scheduled that, of course, I will let you know once they are officially done and in the can. But what is done and in the can is a talk with Jason. Like I said, Jason, former co-host of this podcast, has returned once again. We took the time this past weekend to head over to the AMC Theater to check out Becoming Led Zeppelin. It's about roughly 2 hours long, and the documentary focuses on, we're going to talk about all this, but I'll just give you a quick basis. It focuses on, where the four guys came from, how they came together, and their rise to fame. And it's one of those documentaries that spans basically, the core of the movie is about 66 to 70. It, of course, goes way earlier than that because it talks about their, beginnings getting into music and how they actually got into performing and learning their specific crafts and their, musicianship. And then, of course, how they came together. And, of course, how they rose to be, one of the most important bands in the history of not just rock and roll, but music as well. So, with all that being said, I don't know if I need to really say anything else. Maybe we should just jump into this and hear what Jason and I had to say about Becoming Led Zeppelin. So we just got done watching Becoming Led Zeppelin. Like, we literally just left AMC Theater.
Right.
I guess I don't mind doing a plug. It's not like I'm going to get a sponsorship from them one way or the other. But yeah, AMC, I don't know if they're exclusively showing it or what, but you've probably got maybe a week left in the theaters of seeing this, but I'm sure it will be on a major streaming platform in the coming months as well. But this was one of those things, when I saw it was in the theater, I was like, man, it's just something you should see in a theater if you're a fan, I think, if you got the chance. So hit you up. Here we are. I guess first thoughts, just as a whole, does it stand on its own as compared to, say, a Sam Dunn documentary or something, you think? Because, we kind of hold those in high regards.
I wouldn't say, I don't want to compare because...
Right, everyone's...
This was an amazing documentary and everything he does is amazing, but yeah, I thought this was very well done. It absolutely, it exceeded some things for me. I wasn't very knowledgeable on exactly how it was going to be done.
Right.
I'd seen the trailer. And honestly, I thought, which goes back to, our location faux pas at the beginning was, when I saw a trailer, I could have swore it was like, it said something to the effect of exclusively in Cinemark IMAX or something.
Oh, okay.
So that's why I was like, wow, we're going to AMC? What? Huh? And I didn't know that all 4 members would be interviewed. I didn't know they were going to use old footage of Bonham's voice. I didn't know that present day surviving members were going to be in it. I just thought it was kind of my perception was it was just kind of a collection of old stock footage and old interviews and stuff.
Like someone's take on putting together the history, basically.
Right, yeah, because I don't remember seeing them interviewed in the trailer. I just remember all the clips. But then again, once I get into it, the clips were stuff you'd never seen, or I don't think I'd ever seen, or
right.
Maybe I hadn't seen very much. So I was very uneducated going into this, because I think that at this point, as rock fans, and everybody's got a documentary out, everybody's got something going on, we get so inundated and jaded to stuff that, even if it's something as revered as Led Zeppelin, we're just kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll check it out at some point, but whatever.
Yeah.
But once we got into it, it quickly dawned on me how important this was.
Oh, yeah. I guess my immediate thought after watching it was the same thing. I had no real knowledge on how it was going to be presented, if it was encompassing of from the beginning to now, or what it was. But I really always like documentaries like this, where it stuck to a thing of like, here's a small background on each guy and how they got into music, up to the culmination of their first major performance in London.
Right.
Even though they had got obviously well established before that, it just gave you that time period and nothing past basically 1970.
Mm-hmm.
And a whole section. I mean, when you think of Led Zeppelin, 75% of the world, 70% of your average fans, I would think the first thing that pops in your mind is like Black Dog or Stairway to Heaven.
Right.
And you're getting to watch a documentary where it never even makes it to that point. That's how important this band is.
Absolutely. Which that was a point I was going to make, and that was a point that I'm really. That was something about the film that really pleased me, because as much as I love this band and as much as they're architects of everything that we love, I don't need to hear those songs ever again in my life.
Right.
I don't. I just got done listening just like a month ago. We took a whole weekend listening to every Led Zeppelin record.
Oh, wow.
And
start to finish, like in order?
Yes. And absolutely, those are 2 songs that are great, but they're so overplayed, I don't need to hear them again for the rest of my life.
Yeah. That's a point to say is that, they're one of those rare bands where I think, personally, I could say, all right, here's their discography on Spotify or something, hit shuffle, and never have to skip anything.
No.
There's a handful of bands, even bands I absolutely love. It's like, Guns N' Roses, I'm going to skip a couple of their songs. But, I'm not going to do that with Zeppelin or Faith No More or, maybe Seven Dust. I don't know. I can't think of who else.
Right.
Clutch, So for them to be in, that aura, and, for you to be able to have a documentary that simply focuses on huge events that never even make it to what they're most well known for is pretty impressive. But you mentioned John Bonham, and that's one of the only thing I knew was I had read this the other day, was that there was unseen or unheard. It just said unseen or unheard clips, which to me jumped out immediately. And I mean, his whole presence in the film was basically those clips,
right?
Outside of some pictures and video, obviously. Mm-hmm. How do you make it? Who knows when they started making this documentary, a few years ago or something. I mean, how do you make it over 40 years with this shit never getting released?
That's what gets
baffling.
Me. It's like in some of the video clips too. I'm like, There's some stuff that we've seen and that was in this documentary, but there's some stuff I'd never seen.
Yeah.
And the same thing with John Bonham's interview. How did we get this far without that never being released to the public?
unless it was planned or actually
Yeah.
found. I can't imagine something like that was just found recently, but it's like, a totally different area,
Yeah,
but
I
it's
mean,
like
that-
the Michael Jordan Last Dance documentary from a couple years ago,
right.
that 10 episode thing, like the fact that they made it almost 25 years before any of this footage was seen. Like, how do you,
Yeah, I don't know.
in this day and age, especially,
Yeah, that is beyond me.
especially
I
a band
can't,
where there's been a million reissues of shit,
I can't answer that
I know.
because I mean I have no idea how any of that works.
But it's a huge calling card, obviously, for this.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's great, and it's very very revealing and just great to sink your teeth into for any Zeppelin fan.
Yeah. And one of the points that I thought about halfway through, and especially at the end, because the very end is kind of the three of them listening to a final clip from Bonham talking about them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how weird or joyful of a feeling do you think that would be when you sat down and you're listening to a friend of yours from, their voice from 45 or, who knows when I scored, I said 40 plus years ago talking about you,
Right.
In a revered fashion, like, just kind of, what do you think the three of them went through? That's just got to be crazy.
Well, that's one of the things I wanted to bring up. It was one of my favorite parts of the documentary was when they would play his sound bites and their faces reacting to them.
Yeah.
Now I hope that was actual reaction and not just
An
editing.
actual first
Yeah,
time.
I hope it wasn't just editing. But that was really cool to see, and that was really a connecting. I don't know, connecting of then to now. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And I think that, moreover, furthermore, whatever, I really like that they would show them clips of them back then,
Yeah.
or they would have clips of the artists that influenced them, like the I already forgot the guy's name, Lonnie something.
The one that did Train Kept Rolling?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's
Jimmy
just,
Page
and it's how, and so that's what they latched onto is Train Kept Rolling, which, Aerosmith latched onto, Motorhead latched onto. And it's just like this straight line of, you see where it all makes sense from then to now.
Yeah.
That was definitely something I wanted to talk about. I really thought that was fascinating, and it was very timeless
Yeah.
to me.
Yeah, good point. And yeah, I mean, that plays into your point of seeing their reactions to hearing Bonham, but like, I think it was initial reactions because you see like especially Jimmy Page was probably the most animated as far as reactions. And like when he was watching, like, I think it was the New Orleans Jazz Festival performance, some festival he was watching clips of, and you could
Right.
see he was just like really happy. And then he said, I'd never seen a clip of this. It's just photos. So,
Which again makes you wonder, really?
Yeah.
You never seen this?
right. It could have been one of those things unearthed later on, and he just no one ever showed it to him.
Right.
It's like, but one thing that I thought of before, like the only question I thought of beforehand that I was going to ask you, and I guess ask myself, was, did you learn anything? And I mean, I think, obviously when you see a documentary, especially focusing on very early stuff from a band that was their early stuff was before our time, you're definitely going to learn stuff. The immediate thing that jumped out to me is I don't know that I ever knew that they actually performed a show as the Yardbirds. Is that common knowledge?
I don't know.
Just,
I do remember the whole idea about them being in New Yardbirds and then changing to Led Zeppelin.
Yeah.
I know I've heard that before.
Yeah. I remember like it even being wasn't it called the New Yardbirds?
Oh, I have no idea.
Like,
Don't
unless
get
I'm
me- I don't
confusing
know
with
what to
another
say.
band. There was some band that had the New in front of it. But regardless, I just didn't know they ever actually performed as the lineup of Led Zeppelin.
Right.
And another thing that jumped out to me that, like, on learning shit was just like, I mean, Jimmy Page was very involved. Of course, he was the kind of musical mastermind, especially in the early days.
Yes.
But just like how much intricacies and, in depth he was with, like, he talked about his vision before even the first album, the second album.
Right.
And then his vision of laying out the first album where it didn't have breaks and it was interconnected to where, you basically needed to listen to the full side of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then they go into that meeting with the whoever the heads of Atlantic,
Mm-hmm.
and basically say that we're not releasing singles, or we're not putting out singles, we're putting out a full album.
Right.
And you can take it or leave it. And basically, since they recorded this shit before they presented it to the Hang, and Peter Grant went in there and strong-armed him and said, "This is the fucking music, take it or leave it."
Yeah.
I mean, that's basically, like I think they mentioned, one of them mentioned was that's unheard of. And I mean, that's still something that became unheard of even, decades later,
Right. I know that, I mean, some of that stuff I've heard, some of that stuff I've read. There was a book by years and years and years ago by their old stage manager or something. God, I can't remember. I think it was like called Hammer of the Gods or something.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah.
I didn't read it, but I remember that book.
And it was panned by a lot of people, by critics, and I know the band didn't like it. But there's a lot of stories in there, a lot of stuff about Peter Grant, how intimidating he was. And so, I mean, I'm sure I've read stuff, but I've probably forgotten so much.
Yeah.
So, you think about that clip. I guess it was their first performance or something, whatever. It was supposed to be a Yardbirds, show, but it ended up being Led Zeppelin in Scandinavia, and had all the kids coming in and sitting down Indian style.
Well, that's the one where they were still billed as the Yardbirds.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
That's what I was referring to.
Can you imagine? And in that the intensity of that show, because they played like a whole song or two from that.
Yeah.
Just sitting there imagining, just seeing that. Can you imagine being that person?
No, because it's
wow, do I know what I'm seeing right now?
We never lived in a world to where you got to experience shit like that where it had never been heard.
Right.
You can be exposed to stuff for the first time, but not like on a full group of people like that.
Right. and I hate to venture off on a tangent, but I'm just gonna have to.
Yeah.
Years ago in my 20s, when I worked at TV Guide, the company from downtown Tulsa that built our cubicles and serviced our cubicle material had an old British guy that worked for him, and he told me stories about him seeing Led Zeppelin in the clubs and in the early days, and I would just stand there in awe.
Yeah.
Of him describing that. And that guy saw it, I mean, just to be, we don't have that, Trent.
I mean, we have it with some bands that
we have it on a certain level. I saw Avenged Sevenfold at the other side before anyone knew who they were. They opened up for Mushroom Head.
Yeah.
But that doesn't anywhere completely near pale in comparison.
Right.
To seeing Led Zeppelin before anyone knew who they were.
Yeah.
I mean, it's madness, really. It's insane to be able to talk to a guy in person that was like, yeah, I was there before they were anything. I mean, I just can't believe it.
I mean, it's always cool when you just talk to anyone that just saw Led Zeppelin in general.
Right. Well, yeah, true. Very
I mean,
true.
because, we were obviously 10 years too young to really get that opportunity.
Yeah.
But, yeah, just the fact that not only saw them, but saw them in their infancy and multiple times in tiny clubs, you just can't fathom,
All right. And another point, which just points that I wanted to get out. I don't know what you have.
Not a lot left.
But I'm just kind of rambling at this point. No pun intended, but ramble on.
Of course.
I liked how they focused on that for a minute. That was always one of my favorite Led Zeppelin songs.
Same.
And when we saw Page and Plant in Kansas City in '95, they played that song, and it was really cool, really important to me. And just to hear them focus on that song and talk about that song, and that was really cool. And also, I think when he was talking about what is and what should never be, about the I wanted the verses light and the choruses heavy.
Yeah.
I mean, that again, they're architects.
Yeah.
It's just blueprints, dude, because how many times do you hear that now? You know, how many times have we heard that for the last 50 years? And it's just, I'm telling you, Led Zeppelin, along with Black Sabbath, but I can't leave them out, but mainly Led Zeppelin, because this is what we're talking about. Nothing we listen to now, nothing we like, would be possible without those two bands.
Right.
I mean, that's just, if anything, just the drums. You know?
For sure, yeah.
I mean, you just had regular, you know, just keeping time up until then. But once, you know, Bonham came out, and, you know, the fills and the triplets and the solos and the intensity. I mean, we wouldn't be listening to anything if it wasn't for that.
Right. It was like when John Paul Jones said, you know, James Brown's entire band was out there watching him rehearse, you
Absolutely.
know, or watching John Bonham rehearse, because, you know, that shit was just not unheard of. And these are guys that are rooted in that kind of, you know, awesome playing, I'm sure. You know?
Oh yeah. I really liked how in the film they had that overhead angle of Good Times, Bad Times.
Oh, when they're recording it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, again, why haven't we seen that?
Yeah, I know.
Where's that been for the last 50 years?
Right.
And, you know, it just had an overhead view of the bass drum and his foot.
Yeah.
I mean, that was just so cool.
And just how John Paul Jones talked about, you know, how he would leave space sometimes for another hit from like the bass drum or whatever, just because
talking
of
how
important his power was.
Yeah, he loved his right foot, you know?
Yeah. Something, you know, totally different from the film that I thought was kind of cool. I know I'd seen it in a couple other documentaries about who knows who, but like it always, you know, fascinated me what John Paul Jones talked about in his early days before, when he became a session musician, about going down on Monday morning, you know, and hanging out, all those guys in the street, you know, hoping to get picked, kind of like, you know,
guys like day workers,
day
Home
workers
Depot
or something,
or whatever.
You know,
isn't that crazy? I just can't.
Like this day and age, that's just that doesn't even make sense, you know. So just the fact that was a scene and that was a big thing,
right?
To see that is just really cool. And another thing I thought was interesting, you know, about the whole concept of Led Zeppelin is that so many of bands, especially from that time period, or pretty much any time period of a band that, you know, when they're really young like that, you don't have four guys that are already somewhat established as musicians. Mm-hmm. Like Robert Plant talked about, he was still basically living out of a fucking van or whatever, but like he had released singles, he was doing the shit. You know, the other three guys were all doing the shit in different capacities, and then they all came together to form a band that, and I think that's probably why they were able to skyrocket within basically just 3 years of forming, you know?
Right. Well, yeah, that first performance that they showed, they'd been together a month.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember being in a little band as a kid or as a young adult, whatever, I don't know. And we thought we had to practice for a year before we even got in front of people. I mean, that's just, you know, it's crazy. But because of, you know, things like the Monday morning, you know, all the musicians gathering around and looking for work, because guys like that did that, now these kids can be in their bedroom on their computer doing whatever.
Yeah, basically.
I mean,
it's another good point.
Like,
what
it opened the door for.
Yeah.
Which, you know, I don't know, however you look at that could be a good or a bad thing. That's a whole other episode. But,
yeah.
I mean, that's where it's at.
Yeah. And something totally random that jumped out to me was seeing Jimmy Page on stage in like 1969 wearing a black leather jacket. And he looked totally out of place for that time period, but looked way ahead of his time.
Yeah.
You know, that's what dudes were doing in the, you know, mid to late 70s and, of course, the 80s.
Yeah.
You know, he already had this look decades before
and, you know,
it became an actual look, you know?
What was funny is he had the really, really long hair when the hair was, like, still kind of short. Long but short.
Yeah.
And then when when the whole style was really long hair in the 70s, his hair was shorter.
Yeah.
Not that hair matters. But it's funny that you mentioned that. I noticed that too.
Yeah, because within a couple years, you seeing him on stage, he looked more the part of like, that kind of scene.
Right.
But still, most guys wouldn't kind of branch out like that in that time period. They're trying to fit the scene, fit the view of what people, want to see or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
And that's just another reason they completely blaze their own trail,
Yeah. And think about it. Look at most of the bands from that era and how, one, most of them are dead. Two, a lot of them can't even walk. But you got three guys. Jimmy Page is 81.
Yeah. John
Paul Jones is 79. Robert Plant 76. Those guys still seem really with it.
Yeah.
All they'd have to do is get Jason Bonham, and I mean it would explode.
Right.
And I think those guys are still alert and with it and animated to the point where they could do it.
Right.
And I think that's something to hang your hat on.
Oh, yeah.
But also at the same time, I kind of dig that they don't.
Yeah. But I mean, yeah, with anything, it always comes down to, we've always heard, we've even heard in recent years from Jimmy Page that it's basically Robert Plant that doesn't want to do it.
Right.
Or was it John Paul Jones? It's one of the other two.
I think
I've always assumed it was Plant, but.
Because, Robert Plant admits I can't sing like I used to.
Yeah, he's been saying that for 20 years, which is great.
Yeah.
Great that he's cognizant of the fact that he can't hit some of those notes.
Yeah.
But I still think that they could craft a set list.
Yeah.
They could craft a set list that he could perform Zeppelin songs and just not sing rock and roll or something, Just, right. I don't know.
No, I think you're totally right. Because, what was it? In 2005, we saw him at Kane's Ballroom.
Yeah.
And he did Zeppelin songs, but it was different arrangements just to accommodate his voice.
Yeah.
They could do that.
Yeah.
I think they could do that, and it would still be awesome.
Right.
Because it's fucking Led Zeppelin. But also, again, like I just said, I kind of think it's cool that they don't.
Yeah, leave it where it was.
Because every band and their mother never stops now.
Yeah.
They're literally going to wheel Ozzy on stage because he cannot walk anymore.
To probably sing summer. 2 songs or some shit.
Yeah, and I don't think they need to, but whatever.
No, that whole idea, not to go into full tangent is like...
No, but when you turn which I forgot about all this, that we haven't talked in a while, since this broke, we texted about it, but when you turn the recorder off, we're gonna have a chat about this.
Okay.
Because I forgot about that.
I think the only other thing I was thinking of is like, you got a band of 4 uniquely amazing musicians,
Right.
There's a handful of bands out there that can claim that. But this always put them above everybody else because can you think of any other band? The only other band I can think of that has 4 musicians that stand on their own as like top 5 in their fucking respective place in their, instrument maybe. Top 5 or 10 is The Who. Because
right.
Sabbath, as much God love Ozzy, but he's not on a top 10 level of vocalists.
No.
Maybe as a performer, as a frontman, sure, but just to see, these 4 guys, and then you got John Paul Jones, who never truly gets you always got to have like the Mick Mars, the one guy that's like kind of gets lost in the shuffle because the other 2 or 3 are always so much bigger than, larger than life.
But when you think about it, Jimmy Page is known for one thing. John Bonham, one thing. John Paul Jones played the bass. He played the keyboards. He played the organ. He played the mandolin.
Yeah.
Whenever they needed a dulcimer or whatever the big, huge bass thing that was in the movie.
Yeah.
He would do it.
Right. He's the Eric Reese of...
there you go. There you go.
Right. But yeah, so this, I guess to kind of bring it to a close, this is definitely worth your time if you're just a rock fan, if you're not even, for some weird reason, you're not a huge fan of Zeppelin. It's like, we've talked about this many times throughout the podcast and even years before the podcast. We're both fans of documentaries in music to the point that we'll watch a documentary of a band we don't even give a shit about because it seems interesting, or a genre or something, just because if it's a well-done documentary, it's cool to learn shit.
Right.
So I would highly So I assume if you're listening to this podcast, you like Led Zeppelin, right? I mean, do you know any rock fans that don't like Led Zeppelin? I've heard people on occasion mention it.
Offhand, no.
Yeah, because it's just not one of those bands you really ever hear people like. You hear drastic things about. I'll say I don't like the Eagles, or
right.
You don't like the Beatles,
right?
Or, there's major bands from a historical aspect.
Right. There used to be a guy, back when I would listen to the Eddie Trunk Show a lot. Excuse me. Like there'd be an episode about, who's your most overrated band. There'd be some dude that would come on and be like, F the Beatles. I hate the Beatles. I'm like, I don't enjoy the Beatles, but I don't hate them. Calm down, dude.
Right.
I mean, I can definitely recognize their influence and how all modern music wouldn't be the same without them. That doesn't mean I hate them. This guy was violent.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's like, I guarantee you, if he listed his top 5 or 10 bands, every one of those bands, there's going to be someone in that band whose favorite band's probably the Beatles.
Oh, definitely. Pink Floyd's another one. I just don't understand how anybody, that is not a fan of boredom likes that band. But, hey, whatever.
Right.
That's just me.
But yeah, on that note, if a Pink Floyd documentary came out, you'd probably watch it at some point.
Oh,
right?
Maybe.
I mean, maybe.
I don't know.
Or at least if it was a documentary on David Gilmour.
If I could be at home.
If I didn't have to listen to Roger Waters' bitch,
If I could be... That's well, actually, Roger Waters, his activism is the one thing I like about it, but we don't have to go into that.
Well, I'm not against that. I just said he kind of bitches too much for my taste sometimes.
Well, true. But if I could be at home on my couch where I could get up and go to the bathroom, get another beer or something, yeah. I would probably watch a Pink Floyd documentary, yeah.
All right. But yeah, I guess anything else to say about becoming Led Zeppelin?
I think we covered it.
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely worth your time and checking out. So, this is, I didn't even think of looking before this very moment. I don't know when the last time you were on. It's been at least a year, right?
I have no idea, but thanks for having me back on.
Yeah, glad we finally did it again, and let's do it again sooner than later.
And remember, whenever you get James Hetfield on, I want to come back.
All right.
There you go. Jason Wood returned, and we talked about becoming Led Zeppelin. So, of course, a huge thanks to Jason for taking some time out there. That's what I always say, taking some time out there to talk to me. But, Jason, as good friends do, takes time out to talk to me on, most days of the week. We usually text each other something. I don't think it was too much of a stretch for him to take some time out there to talk to me. But, of course, I'm always glad to have Jason back on the podcast. Cool to spend some time checking out Becoming Led Zeppelin, and then, of course, discussing it right here for all of you to hear and either inspire you to check out this movie or inspire you to disagree with something we said. I don't know. I don't think either one of us said anything too bizarre or, what's the right word I'm looking for, controversial, in that a hot take type thing. We love Led Zeppelin, and the movie was great, and here you go. Well, I guess Jason did, talk a little shit about Pink Floyd, which many people hold in high regard. So, there you go. If you got any negative things to say, you can send it to me, and I will forward it directly to Jason. How about that? Or maybe in the comments, I'll drop you his personal cell phone number. I don't know. Probably won't do that. But anyway, once again, if you're a huge fan of Jason, you could check out about, I didn't look at what his final episode date was, but it was 300 something. So you got 300 something episodes. You could go back and hear more from Jason. His last episode, of course, was kind of a celebration and discussion throughout the years. And of course, we did that on a few other milestone episodes. I can't say that there has ever been a member of Led Zeppelin on here, that I could say, hey, check out that episode. But there has been Rock and Roll Hall of Fame members like Gene Simmons of Kiss, Glenn Hughes of Deep Purple, Dizzy Reed of Guns N' Roses. I know we had at least 4. Oh, Vivian Campbell is a Rock and Roll Hall of Famer with Def Leppard. He should also be a Rock and Roll Hall of Famer with Dio. But for some fucked up reason, Dio isn't in the Hall of Fame. Just like Soundgarden isn't in the Hall of Fame. I specifically mentioned them because they were nominated this year, and I see no way that they get in. Iron Maiden isn't in the Hall of Fame. who Motorhead, Lemmy, isn't in the Hall of Fame. Boston isn't in the Hall of Fame. Bad Company was just nominated. How the fuck are they not in the Hall of Fame? That's an old, tired argument, and I don't even know why I just went on that tangent. Oh yeah, because we've had Rock and Roll Hall of Famers on this podcast. I'm using it as a calling card and then bitching about it. Kind of hypocritical, right? I don't know. But anyway, we've also had on Ricky Medlock from Lynyrd Skynyrd. Damon Johnson, who is now in Lynyrd Skynyrd, has been on this podcast 6 times, more than anybody else besides C.J. McClellan, who has been on here 7 times, I believe. Either 6 or 7. But CJ is in Dime Store Riot, who I just said earlier is at Rocklahoma once again. He was previously in Grind. Great dude, great friend of the podcast. You know, there's been members of, if you like thrash metal, Testament, Creator, Megadeth, Death Angel, Havoc, Municipal Waste. No, hold it. I haven't had anyone from what am I saying? Anyway, sorry, Toxic Holocaust. That's who I was trying to think of. But it also had on members of current rock, those big, radio rock style bands like Hellstorm, Three Doors Down, Shinedown, Saliva, all that kind of stuff. I've had on a lot of the 80s glam era, Tesla, LA Guns, Kicks, Slaughter, Warrant, Firehouse. I mentioned Def Leppard and Guns N' Roses, Motley Crue, Whitesnake. I've all had members on here throughout the years, so just dig back through there. 410 previous episodes. The last episode was Robin McCauley from the Michael Schenker group from Black Swan. That dude's a phenom. We've also recently had on Bumblefoot, previously of Guns N' Roses in Asia and all kinds of great stuff. Had on Adrian Vandenberg last year, two of the masterminds behind the almighty Living Color. The list is great and long. Dig through there. Breaking Benjamin was just announced as a headliner for Rocklahoma. Keith Wallen was on here just last year. Check that out. All right. Once again, I appreciate everybody listening. TheThunderUnderground.com. You can listen right there. You can also listen pretty much anywhere podcasts are heard. Wherever you're listening, if you don't already have it saved, just hit like, subscribe, whatever that platform gives you the option of doing. If you're on Spotify or anything like that, if you feel so inclined, if you would, hit the 5-star review or the 4-star, whatever, you feel one deserves, those stars, of course, help the podcast get seen by more people. Do that on any platform you're on. If you just like the episode, share the episode, or, review the podcast, that usually helps greatly. So check out all the socials. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, X, TikTok, and, of course, drop me a line, shoot me a message. If you see me at a show in public, say what's up, all that great stuff. Once again, a massive thank you to Jason for making his way back. Once again, you need to check out Becoming Led Zeppelin whenever you get the chance. And until next time.
Thunder Underground, y'all.